and a lot of our large fires down.
And I think that's in addition to the 18 community walks I've had. We've given out 1,900 smoke detectors.
I believe about 5 years ago, on average, 25 multi-alarm fires a year. We're down to about 1 or 2. I hope we can keep it that way and it stays a trend. A lot of that has to do with organizing our inspection department, good quality inspections, not necessarily just going out there and getting the numbers in, and educating the public and getting these smoke detectors in. It's amazing that some of these mayor's walks and stuff, entire blocks, people have like maybe one in a home, and affluent neighborhoods too. It's just something that people don't think of until something happens. So we're out there, we're blanketing neighborhoods, and we have the Red Cross and the Health Bureau as our partners doing that. Everything's pretty much stable. Under communications, the same thing with the police department, and you'll hear from EMS, page 156. When we broke apart the 911 budget, our MDTs that have air cards in them, they needed to be budgeted somewhere. So the fire department, which used to fall under, I believe, 911 or IT, we're just budgeting for our own. That number should not have changed much from the where it was lumped in the old budget. Same page. Under department contracts, I added a grant writing service. There is an individual by the name of John Sly that actually got us the AirPack grant right when I was coming on as fire chief. He has a flat fee of $2,500. He is up on the FEMA grant. I did try to write it twice. I didn't get anywhere the last 2 years. Talking to John Sly, the fire department is actually in a pretty good place right now. He recommended that this upcoming year with the FEMA grant is probably going to be more driven towards EMS. So it's in there. We'll probably use it for writing a grant for our EMS department. I don't know if you want to hit on that. Other than that, there's really no new additions. I adjusted it to the budget to with some of the overtime and stuff like that to the raises that were anticipated. I thank everybody for the capital budget allowing us to purchase the Engine 5 that went in the Lincoln Fire Station about a month ago, and we're on track then to have a new engine, a rescue engine at the Broad Street Memorial Fire Station. And I took advantage of working with Eric and Mark to get the discounts on those trucks by paying in increments when major parts come in. If you pay for the aerial device at a certain date, they'll give you discounts. So that gives me the opportunity to buy a lot of the replacement equipment that we use for like Jaws of Life and stuff like that. That'll come in with the truck, so I won't have to be putting it in the yearly budget. So airbags, Jaws of Life, thermal imaging cameras, we're trying to bring them in on the trucks so that we're not all getting them at the same time, and we're spreading out these purchases. There's a few years back in the late 90s where a lot of times we bought multiple things at the same time, and then they're breaking at the same time. So what we're trying to do with the capital purchases, I'm also trying to do with the smaller equipment, is spread out those costs. I'll open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Clone?
Thank you. Chief, just a couple quick questions, some in the same line of questions for Chief Deluzio. In terms of your overall set, I know it's 110 total in fire, 108 uniformed. Again, you're rarely ever working with that 108 number. How many were hired this year, give or take?
I hired 4 or 5 this year. Right when I hired and put them in the academy, one firefighter quit that had about 14 years on the job, and another one retired. So right now we're down 2. So if the budget passes, I have 2 to go in the academy, budgeted for 2 to go in the academy in March.
And then talk about recruitment. Chief Deluzio said they had to exhaust their list to get to where they were at. How are you doing with applications and everything
We
like
have
that?
no issue at all.
Yeah.
Everybody loves the fire department.
Oh.
No, except Mark. No, we have no issue. We're right now our civil service lists are all lined up. They're all current. Everything from the deputy chief on down. So I'm looking at 2 people. There's probably 35 on the list.
Okay.
We don't have any disqualifiers. We don't use the polygraph. But I don't see any issue with recruitment.
And then with the fire department, they're sworn in before they start the academy?
We did that years ago, and I just didn't feel that the pomp and circumstance needed to be there until you actually passed. We do a quick informal swearing in with the mayor when they are hired, just in case we get them on the street before we can actually have that formal ceremony.
But when do they start getting paid? After the academy?
No, immediately the day they get hired.
The day they get hired. So while they're attending the academy,
Yeah. So
they're on the clock.
there's a step in the contract. It's recruit pay.
Okay, so it's
like
less
step
than
1. It's less than
a
the
first year firefighter.
step A firefighter. Yeah.
Understood. And how's the fleet looking? I know we have Mr. Evans went over in some of how we're going to look to replace some engines and apparatus that there was a gap in bringing on new vehicles in the department.
Right.
Do you find the department's putting some of the older vehicles out of service often because of mechanical issues, or
We
they
have
kind of patching it up and making
Yeah.
do?
So I've said this number of times. We have a great city garage. And a couple of years ago when Allentown was going through a lot of those things that you saw in the newspaper, some of our equipment was actually older. They were keeping it on the road. I feel very comfortable with the capital budget plan that we put together. So we have 2 new aerials that came in, and I say new, I think one's about 7 years old, one's 2 or 3 years old, ladder aerial 2. Then we brought this 3rd aerial device in to replace the Quint that was there. We had a newer engine, I believe, in the last 5 years. So we frontline pieces. We probably have 3 that are still aged, but we'll get through. I feel right now pretty comfortable with everything. And then the smaller vehicles, we got rid of all the Crown Vics that were handed down from the police department that we're using as inspectors' vehicles. They were all 8 cylinders. So we're either using the SUVs like the police department, or I don't even know what they are, small Cavalier style
And then
inspectors' cars.
I know with this budget, we're keeping the number of personnel the same. A couple years ago, I think it was maybe the year before we came on council, myself and Ms. Negron, I think the department had downsized by 2 firefighters. With maybe there's just a change in apparatus and equipment, things like that. With some of the newer vehicles and models and things like that, would you foresee in the near future but seeing less of a need for actual manpower, or do you think that number of 108 is going to stay pretty constant for the years to come?
Well, 108 is the total manpower for the department. What we tried to do to keep 5 engines and 2 aerials and the command vehicle, we need 18 working. And that's where we are, give or take. There's some fluctuation in the total number on a platoon because you have to account for vacations, personal days, injuries, and stuff like that. So most days we're above 18, but that's the target that I'm comfortable working with. Maybe years down the line, we may need to increase the fire department. based on development, but some of that gets offset with these buildings that are going in are state of the art. And they have a firefighter every 15 feet in the ceiling. So it's time will tell. It's a judgment on the age of the older buildings and what's being done with them and how they're being upkept. The newer development coming in, we're meeting all our call volume. Our injuries are probably at a historic low. I believe like last year, maybe 6 injuries, a couple twisted ankles, a bee sting.
Well, that's encouraging to hear. Thank you, Chief. Those were all my questions. Thank you, President Walter.
Dr. Van Wert?
Hi, thank you very much. I just have 2 questions. The first question is fairly specific. I can imagine that there's a lot of emerging technology, particularly with drones, that's beneficial to the safety of firemen as well as just the efficacy. Does Bethlehem anticipate the kind of like a sanctioned or a well-trained drone program to help you have eyes where you can't be?
So we would probably use drones more on the investigative side, unless we would get into something real big, like maybe a fire on South Mountain, and we really want to see what's going on.
Mhm.
The police department has a drone, and they have, when you start getting the commercial and government drone operators, they have to be licensed through the FCC and stuff. So that's available. And then Lehigh County's special operations team has a whole drone team, and we've used them. We've used them at Music Fest. We used them at the Steel Stacks incident. I would probably call them in.
Mhm.
They're doing it more often. The pilots are really precise, and I don't think we have a need for that yet.
And they'll come into Northampton County and
Yes.
help you? That's good. Okay. And then,
Can I just add
oh,
on?
sure.
I mean, when we had the incident for 24 hours, the chief was there for all 24 hours, there for 12. When Lehigh County's team came in, along with Scranton and Montgomery County's team and Northampton County's team, we had one drone parked on the Arts Quest building on the roof that was just aimed right at the person, and we watched them constantly on the closed circuit TV. And then they would set up their other drones for every 30 minutes. So we actually had 2 drones constantly for 24 hours that were just invaluable as far as the data that we were able to get. So, but we have a very good partnership with them through the chief and Chief DeLuzio that they'll come in and assist.
Okay. That's good to know. The second one is a little bit just to give me some perspective and perhaps reassurance. When I think of the Allentown, and I don't know whether the most recent explosion was ever found to be gas or not, but I always worry about our infrastructure and how you feel our own gas lines are in terms of risks of large explosions like that. Is there something that you can use to determine whether or not we are at risk for those types of incidents?
We see gas leaks, but they're not catastrophic. I think it's got to be 10 years since we had seen a gas explosion, and that was over in the avenues. The Allentown call was not a gas explosion. I was actually with the chief and the UGI representatives. It had nothing to do with gas. They're still looking into that. We continue in the old water control room. They do the 311 calls. So that's a big part of it is these the contractors that come in and do, and you know, the private contractor stuff, digging up our streets, water lines and stuff like that in people's homes. Important that they're calling that 311 dig, or not 311, it's something 511. Think before you dig program. That's where we see a lot of our calls. But if they're doing that, I haven't really seen
Okay.
much of an issue.
Thank you. That's all.
And I believe that there is some new pipeline going in. I think there was some new street last year. Yeah. So
Okay.
Allentown, or UGI's learned from a lot in Allentown, and they're trying to replace their old infrastructure.
That's what that's about, is trying to make sure that we don't have any type of catastrophic accident, as well as just regular maintenance.
Right.
And that's probably another 4 years they'll be at UGI.
And we do have a UGI gas plant that's going in, liquefied gas down Easton Road and Ringhofer. They're offering us training. They'll be sending my training captain up to Massachusetts. So we work with them. They're actually starting to recognize NIMS, the framework since 9/11 on incident command and stuff like that. I met with all the UGI representatives the other day, and we've really become a good partner with them.
Thank you very much. That's all.
Mrs. Negron?
Thank you, President Waldron. I just have a couple of questions. The first one is related to code, and it's because of the fire, Dr. Barnwell was mentioning. But when a few years back, when Allentown had that bad UGI explosion, I mean, it was related to gas, but a whole block also blew up. And I was working for the city of Allentown then. So I was very involved in that accident, the incident, and the process. And something that I learned because my involvement was the importance of firewalls. Like I didn't even know what a firewall was, and the importance, especially between row homes and with all the old stock of houses that we have in the South Side, most of them with no firewalls. And my house, I just sold it this year, but it didn't have a firewall. Like when I heard about it, I'm like, oh my God, do I have a firewall? And I learned that it wasn't until next door neighbor sold their house that they did renovation and learned that the attic part of our homes did not have, we have firewall, but not the attic. However, both attics, theirs and ours, when we bought the house were habitable, had bedrooms. So with no firewall. And that, I freaked out when I thought, because just the thought of that domino effect. And we put a firewall between our attics, but it makes me wonder, do we have any kind of code in the city that anybody that is doing any kind of construction work will make sure that we have firewalls, because they could really save
So,
lives?
These row homes and stuff, firewalls,
Mhm.
solid brick up through the
Right.
middle. And the other one, and it was big catchword was with this Allentown fire, was the balloon construction, where it's straight through from the basement all the way up into the attic. No fire stops on the way.
Mhm.
It's out there. It's out there. You can't force anybody to retro unless they're actually doing work on the building.
Right.
Typically, how that building was built during the code that existed at that time.
Mhm.
So it's there. We have a career fire department. We're aggressive. We get these smoke detectors into the houses
Mhm.
where food burning on the stove
Mhm.
doesn't
Yeah.
turn into a structure fire.
Yeah.
So trying to detect these fires early is what we're doing. We've got the latest code. You guys adopted it. We're enforcing it. We have 5 fire inspectors.
Mhm.
They're out
Mhm.
there. Allentown does not do that.
I know.
Allentown, they just do schools and high occupancy. We're out there with every commercial business, and that also bleeds into the housing inspections, the building inspectors. All the work that they do also helps with the fire safety.
So new constructions are including the firewalls all the way to the top of the roof
It
now?
depends on the type of
The
building
construction.
that we're talking
Right,
about.
right. Yeah.
And then you also have sprinklers,
Sure.
detectors,
Yeah.
alarm
Make a big difference
systems.
too.
Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. My last question, and that's a question I had for the chief, but I was so late that I didn't want to hold everybody. But it's a general question to you and to the administration in general. How many Latinos do you have in the force? From your 108?
Out of 108, 5 or 6.
Okay. And I know a few, so I know you do have some. And is that include EMS? That 108 number is including EMS?
I'm not sure. Yeah, but Tom's got
You have one?
one. Yeah.
Okay. Good. So I'm only putting this question out there because when I was working for Steve Samuelson, we had a Latino man that he actually used to come to our office. He only spoke Spanish, and he literally came to the office every Friday with a shopping bag full of his mail from the last week literally put it on my desk and wanted me to open the mail and interpret what was the letters about. So, and he was he was fighting cancer. And he was getting worse and worse. He used to play the guitar for his Holy Infancy Choir. He used to walk around with his guitar. So, many things I will never forget this man. He passed away a couple of years ago. He came to our office once. He was pale, and he could barely talk. And I was trying to figure out what was going on. I said I had to call 911. This man is going to faint in here. And we did. And EMS was, of course, the first one inside, like you always have done. And I have nothing but great things to say about EMS or police. I unfortunately have had to use it, and it's incredible work and services. But in this case, it was so frustrating because not only he could barely speak because of his health condition, the situation that he was going through, but the EMS didn't speak nobody spoke Spanish. And then police came and same situation. It got to the point that they were sitting him to take him to the hospital. And the staff at Steve Samuelson's office said, just go, follow them, because they're going to get to the hospital and the same thing is going to happen, right? And exactly that happened. We went to St. Luke's, and I was not allowed in because, of course, I was just somebody, right? Not a family. And he kept on calling Olguita. Where's Olguita? Where's Olguita? That's all he was able to say. It got to the point that the doctor came out and said, who's Olguita? I need you in there. They got an interpreter on a screen and was trying to help them figure it out, but it was hard to interpret even through that system that the hospital has. That's what the doctor came out and got me, and I helped serve as interpreter in this life-threatening situation. So these are things that I've seen too often. I think the number of Latinos keep on growing, and I am concerned that we might not be able to provide some services that we should be especially in moments like this. So I just putting a word out there for the administration that as we are hiring and looking into hire staff, especially in positions like this, that bilingual, it's something that is really considered, because we are growing, we're not going anywhere, and we need to be served as well. Thank you, Chief.
Ms. Ramsey-Smith.
I'll be brief. Most of my questions are answered, but again, thank you to you and your staff for your service, because I know it is a real sacrifice. My only question is just about the uniform cost on page 151. It looks like in the last 5 years, it's pretty much doubled in cost. And I know looking at it, I was really shocked at the cost of uniforms, but can you just sort of talk about that and explain? It looked like in 2015, it was like 64,000, and then it went to 112, and there were spikes in the years in between.
64,000. I'm not.
I mean, I don't know if it's,
So the actual,
we're
like,
manned.
when we're looking at page 154, the actual 55,000 in uniforms, that would be your typical work uniform. Each firefighter by contract is allotted $500. Inspectors get 600. So that's a contractual item. That shouldn't fluctuate much. We budgeted for down 4 items down, 4, 5, 6 firefighters to go to the academy. So those costs were actually cut in half, I believe. I think I budgeted for 4 people last year. So instead of 4,200, we're 2,100 for uniforms, again, contractual. Bunker gear cut in half. The last 3 years, I've been real aggressive in getting the firefighters the turnout gear that they wear in the fires. It was starting to get old. I'm not sure if that went up or down. But the officer that I have is making sure that each firefighter has 2 sets of gear. Both sets of gear are under 10 years old. That's the recommendation by NFPA. Does that answer what you're looking at?
Yeah, I was just, when I saw, I was just shocked at the cost, which I'm sure, everything
Yeah,
is high tech and expensive and
To
I didn't know
outfit
if
a brand new firefighter, just the jacket, the pants, the boots, and the helmet are 3,500. It's not cheap.
Mhm.
Um, and then you got gloves, $150 a pair.
Well, that's what I assumed. I just was curious though. Thank you.
Mr. Callahan?
I have none. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. I'd like to maybe transition to Mr. Decker as
Okay.
we do our annual chat about the numbers that drive your department.
You might be happy this year with our numbers.
Great. Before we do get into that, can you touch a little bit on overtime and temporary help and how those numbers are trending in each direction?
They both are pretty consistent with other years. Now, in the last month, we've had 2 OJIs that are probably going to be a month or so until they come back. We didn't really have any long-term sick leaves this year, so we've been in good shape there. We did have 2 full-timers leave in March, so it took maybe a month to replace them, so we had to backfill their shifts. And we just had one leave 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we're backfilling her shift too.
Yeah, because if you're looking on page 159, you do see that overtime number kind of ticking up.
Yeah.
Where in 2018 to now it's doubled. But then temporary help is trending downward, which I think they're inverse of each other.
It depends on how well the scheduler gets part-timers or temporary help to work. If they can't work, then we use overtime. If we can get temporary help, then
Sure.
we use them
Right.
So it's a balancing game.
Understood. And then to the real matter at hand, service calls and how those are shaking out.
They've remained static for the year. Actually, we're down about 30 calls versus the same time frame last year, but
How-
they're flat.
When is the last time that happened? Because every year it seems like it's gone up by a percentage.
There's speculation that some of it may be people are afraid to call the ambulance because of the insurance
Mm.
with Affordable Care Act and
They know they're
Medicare,
gonna get-
Medicaid.
Get a $800 charge or whatever it is when they can
Possibly.
maybe get themselves to the hospital or to the doctor.
That's what we're speculating. We have no firm data on that, but
Mhm.
it's been stagnant this year, for lack of a better word.
And how is the billing going?
We're doing well. Harrisburg passed House Bill 699 last year, which took effect January 1st of this year, which increased Medicaid reimbursements by 50%.
Mm.
So as of October 31st of this year, we are ahead of last year's revenue by $484,000.
That's substantial.
Yes. So I checked with the department business manager today, and she said we're about 60,000 shy of being budget neutral.
Mr. Sivak, is that revenue side in the book on a page that we can look to?
I just looked at that. It's up in the front,
Right.
page 6.
Page 5, under departmental earnings at the top, it's account number 30519 ambulance.
Mhm. So you're going to surpass any recent numbers, it looks like, based on that. So you're getting more per reimbursement.
Right.
Are you having any better or neutral results getting additional reimbursements that you weren't in the past?
We're still, the administrative assistant's still plugging away. I have not a rule, but I prefer she have turnaround from the time of the call till the time the invoice is out or to the insurance company of 10 days. She's at 4 to 5 days now. So
Yeah, I remember the
She's
backlog
working-
a few years ago. That backlog was
it's 3
substantial.
months.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And-
she's went from 3 months to 4 to 5 days.
So, and how about the percentage of response calls that are being handled by Bethlehem EMS versus other municipalities?
We're still running about 94, 95%. But that hasn't changed either. It's about 700 calls we give away a year to mutual aid. But we're going into Hellertown more often now because their call volume is going up for some reason. So they need extra help and they call us right away since we're the closest ambulance, and we do the same in return to them.
Right. Do we give more than we get in mutual aid?
No. Well, yeah, we do. Actually, I'm sorry. Yes, we do give 700 calls away, but we do not take 700 calls from other agencies.
Right.
Right.
And how is staffing looking?
It's okay. We have to replace someone who's ill or on vacation, so it's not like we can drop down from 6 paramedics on the street to 5. That doesn't work. So
Right.
we always have to have someone replaced.
Yeah.
And like the chief said, sometimes I go out on calls too. So.
I know. I saw you at the
Saw
Sands
me at the
Event Center
Sands,
one
yeah.
evening. So. I
Practice
think-
what you preach.
Right. Great. Well, thank you for that. That's excellent news. I'm sure Mark and Eric like to hear that too. A little extra cash coming in for doing the same thing.
Yeah, a couple of years ago, it was about a negative, almost $500,000 for the department. Now it's nearly break even. So it's a big turnaround to the general fund.
Great. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Decker from members of council? Mr. Klum?
Thank you. For just a couple quick ones, and some of my questions were already answered just now. But going back to recent budgets, when we have budgeted for the safety vests for everyone, everyone's been fitted, has theirs, wearing them during their
Yes.
shifts and everything like that.
Mandatory.
And then what about those? I forget, they were kind of like compression
The Lucas
devices.
CPR devices.
Yeah.
Yes.
How-
They were
how are those
in
going?
service in, I think it was on Valentine's Day, actually, this year. We put them in service. They've been used 44 times. The patient outcomes have not always been optimal, but the devices have worked as they're supposed to.
And everyone is trained on that, even a new hire
Mhm.
who doesn't have experience with that device receives
That's
training.
part of their in-service when they
Understood.
first start. Police love them, fire love them, EMS loves them. It's one less person standing up in the back of an ambulance that's going down the street trying to do CPR. So it's safer too for us.
And then for our surrounding municipalities, where are we the first up when a neighboring municipality has to roll a call over? So if Hellertown, so are we the first for Hellertown?
Yes.
And then what about, does Bethlehem EMS handle Freemansburg?
For Bethlehem Township, they handle
or
that,
Bethlehem
but
Township.
If they're busy, we'll go
So
first.
we would be, and what about Hanover for like
We go into them too.
are we the first up for them when they're busy?
Yeah,
Nice.
that would be Bethlehem Township usually because they respond in for ALS calls in Hanover Township. And if they're going on an ALS call and Hanover is tied up on something else, they'll just take the call.
Okay.
So if they're all tied up, then we'll go.
Those are all my questions. Thank you. Mr. Paul.
I just have to ask you about these compression devices. The outcomes aren't awesome. Have you compared your outcomes so far with using those devices with regular compressions?
We're waiting till we get a year's worth of data, which will be in March. So I'll have a better report for you then. We have gotten, just off the top of my head, I believe we've gotten more return of spontaneous circulation in the field than we have had in the past with these. But once they get to the hospital, as you know, there may be many other issues that they don't ever leave the hospital.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Of course. Yeah. I'm just saying, like, when you said your outcomes haven't been awesome with them.
Some
I
of
mean,
them. Some have, some have not. But
Yeah.
I believe that would be the same if we were doing manual compressions versus the mechanical.
okay.
It's just how long they've been down, their medical history.
Yeah.
Everything like that.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Decker.
Okay.
We will now transition into the Golf Course Enterprise Fund. I'll recognize Eric Evans to start the
Thank you,
presentation.
President Waldron. I'll just make some opening comments and then turn it to Larry Kelchner, general manager of the course. Make a note that the turnaround plan of the golf course started about a year and a half ago. It was in 2018. When the administration renegotiated the labor contract in order to reduce expenses, hired the general manager, who's with us this evening, Mr. Larry Kelchner, whose mission was to provide organization structure and also increase revenue at the course. And then we arranged for financing and worked with council to take on a $1.7 million loan to tackle selected projects. And Mr. Toy, who was not a setup, he happened to appear at the last meeting. If you remember, in the golf clubs were set out front as his prop. Was not a setup, but I think he delivered a little bit of an update prior to our meeting this evening. Is that a lot of people do take a lot of pride in the course, and I know Larry takes a lot of pride in what he does. He's been doing a great job, as is his staff. We've got a lot of great feedback from the golfers, both at the course and through emails and phone calls, that they're appreciative of what's happening out there. I would call the year 2019 as baseline year one of the turnaround of the course as a success, both operationally and financially. It is still a work in progress. There's work to be done, but I know you saw some of the pictures that were in the slideshow. You're always welcome to take visits. Larry's a great tour guide if you ever chapter. A little chilly out there now, but on a little warmer day or when the spring season comes around next summer, to go out on the golf course on a cart, and he can show you some of the things and some of the changes, and you'll be able to talk and see just the positivity that's going on at the course. Financially, the goal last year was to reach about $1.3 million in revenue to really make the model work that we had built. The spring, we opened a little bit late with some projects. It was a wet spring. It did dry up over the summer. It was a solid, not a fantastic, but a fair summer into the fall. We did exceed the goal in revenues. The 1.3 was a goal. We were approaching 1.4 at this time. We're at 1.38. I printed this sheet out 2 days ago. We have 2 rent payments, so that's another $10,000 and some gift cards. And if Mr. Yasa makes just a couple more trips, we're going to hit that. We're really quite confident that we will break the 1.4 barriers. That's a 15% increase in revenue. At the same time, maintenance was increased. Some of the projects came online, and because of the changes to the expense side, we also saw a significant reduction. So, moving into the later stages of the year here, the